I will hand it over to Tom. He'll do his intro and walk us through the agenda and get us started. So, Tom, over to
Yeah.
you.
All right. Thanks, Danielle. Appreciate it. And welcome in, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come spend a little bit of time with me and with us. And so hopefully you can see my screen. And what I want to start with is just the agenda for the webinar today. So I want to kick off the conversation talking about forecast utility rates. If you don't know, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on hospital, just the costs, current averages, as well as where the energy is going in hospitals and healthcare facilities. I want to talk about the ASH Energy to Care dashboard, and curious when we get there to find out if any of you are using that dashboard, and then talk about energy cap and an alternative to it. The bulk of the webinar today is going to be about energy reduction and key improvement strategies. So for each of your facilities, just want to talk about things that you can do, some of the things that you should consider as you try to make changes around your facilities. And then want to finish with a couple of resources that hopefully will be helpful for you. Okay, so with that in mind, what I wanted to do is find out who's on the call today. Just your level of experience in the energy industry. Are you new to it? Have you been working in energy management for years? Or like I say, are you just kind of brand new to it? And as you hopefully take a second to respond to the poll, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been in the energy industry for 20 years. I've been working across many of the different parts of the energy industry. The common theme during that time has been working on the culture piece. So working with people and organizations to look at what they do for energy conservation and coaching and teaching on energy efficiency projects and strategies, and just trying to help wherever I can, recognizing that it all starts with good communication and just trying to get people all on the same page in order to move towards improvement. So, like I say, I'm pretty experienced at this, and wanted to share some thoughts today with you about that. So it looks like we've got a spread of people. We've got a couple of people on the call that are just starting out, and some others with some experience in the industry for years. And hopefully, it makes it a little bit tougher for the presenter to target both of those groups. But I'll do the best I can at trying to meet everybody's needs on the webinar today. So thanks for sharing that. All right. So let me just do this here and get the silly mouse thing going. All right. Okay. All right. And let's see. On to the next slide. Let me get this off the screen as
Oh,
usual.
yeah. Sorry, the poll thing is still there for you.
Yeah.
We like to complicate things technology-wise for Tom.
It always is something. It's par for the course. So as I mentioned a minute ago in the agenda, what I want to do is give you a feel for prices, energy prices in the near future here over the next 5 years. Just giving you a chance to digest this diagram here, this picture. There's a lot to it, so I just want to give you a chance to read a couple things. And the theme here is that regardless of whether you look to the south, you look to the northeast, or to the west, energy prices are on the rise all over the place. There's going to be different reasons as to why they're rising. You might notice in the south, it's population growth, and you jump to the northeast, it's some challenges with renewables, or going out west, it's climate change. So there's all sorts of different reasons, but as I say, the theme is that energy prices are on the rise, so forecasted for the next 5 years to be substantial and even beyond. We all certainly are well aware of all the AI and the data centers and the impact they're having. I think we're going to feel the real impact of that in the near term future, spread out again then over years beyond. But all of it's going to drive energy prices up. And hence, that's the reason to have these conversations and to focus on what you can do proactively to prepare for that, and how you can manage your facilities in ways that are different and maybe better to save some energy and save some money. One of the things I like to do many times at the beginning of a webinar is to just make sure that we recognize what the priorities are. So for healthcare institutions, we recognize the priority is not number one on the list of saving energy and saving money. It's about protecting the patient, protecting the staff, both their safety and their care. That's where the money needs to flow. That's where the efforts need to always be. But there are certain things that can be done with energy and tracking bills and all the things we're going to talk about today to try to offset some of the price increases that are coming. But certainly patient and staff safety and care is number one on the list. Healthcare institutions, as you know, are experiencing higher expectations of environmental responsibility. So that's is, I think, in the beginning stages. It's just going to grow over the course of time, more and more regulatory compliance. And facility managers just wanting to make sure their buildings are resilient, making sure you're protected for all the different events that could take place out there that would affect operations and ultimately affect patient safety and care. So the priorities are those. We recognize that unequivocally, that's where it's got to be. So with that in mind, let's start to unpack what we can do about it. And in doing so, let's talk about what the costs are. Okay, so what I've got on the screen now is where's the energy going? What are some typical costs for healthcare facilities? So you see here in the top left corner that healthcare facilities could range in cost anywhere from $3 to $8 a square foot. So for those of you that are more experienced, where you might know this right away, you might get a snapshot in terms of how your facility is doing compared to its peers. So if you're on the low end, fantastic. If you're on the high end, statistics suggest it's somewhere between $3 and $8 a square foot. To give you a feeling again for the new people in the room, some of these large medical centers are spending more than $5 million a year on utilities. So it's a huge number. And I'm sure some are spending way more than that just because they're so large and there's so many systems and so much energy use going on. The third bullet here, hospitals consume more energy per square foot than any other commercial building other than food and beverage. So hospitals and medical centers, they are expensive. They are hard to operate and they have challenges that we're going to talk about today. Turning this into energy metrics, so another statistic out there is the average EUI, or energy use intensity, is about 234 kBTU per square foot per year. And the best performers are down up to about 150. So once again, if you're on the call, you know your numbers. It just gives you a feeling for where you might be at in the continuum for how you're performing. The chart to the right here is just showing the utility cost distribution, where the money's going. Like as you're paying for utilities, so about 60% of the money goes to paying for electricity, 30% into natural gas, and many times that natural gas is burned and turns into steam, and steam is pumped around, or it moves around a medical campus. And then water and sewer ends up being about 10% of the utility costs. Another thing that I wanted to make sure you're aware of is where that utility use is going within the facility. So we recognize these facilities are influenced significantly by 24/7 operation in many instances. And hospitals and healthcare facilities have a tremendous requirement for indoor air quality conditions. Air needing to be refreshed and the contaminants minimized in order to keep things as healthy as possible. And there's a very high intensity of medical equipment on site. That type of equipment in other industries, just there's really not a great comparison. So it's another apple thrown in with the oranges that's just different. So how we would break out the pie chart here shows you that 50 to 60% of the cost and the energy use in medical facilities is HVAC. Lighting is 15 to 20%. That medical equipment I mentioned a minute ago is 10 to 15%. Water heating 5 to 10, and kitchens and other IT equipment, the smallest piece of the pie is anywhere between 5 to 10% of the total cost. Now, why I think this is important, and you'll see as we continue through the webinar today, is my coaching is that you should always stay focused on the biggest pieces of pie, because the more you control them, the more likely you are to have an impact and save. And so the number one piece unequivocally is HVAC. So as we get well into the webinar today, I'm going to try to give you some recommendations on ways, strategies to manage the HVAC to the best of your ability to try to minimize cost. In lighting, you can see, again, the next biggest piece of pie. It's inevitable, right? There's people all over the place. Lighting needs to be on in many instances, but controlling it as best you can has great value because it is a big part of the bill. Wanted to transition into something you may or may not know about, something called Energy to Care. It's a dashboard through the ASH organization. I put this here because I actually, in a second, I want to ask another poll question to find out who's using this out there. But I want to start with just making sure that you're aware of it. So ASH provides a lot of tools available to medical and healthcare organizations, just great stuff, just great content on their website. And if you're a member, I really recommend exploring more if you haven't spent a lot of time there. But one of the tools that's available is this Energy to Care dashboard. And if you're unfamiliar, it is a utility bill tracking tool. So it allows the user to take all of their utility data and to put it into one spot. So it's a software program, it's online. And the great part of this tool is it also shakes hands with Energy Star portfolio managers. So if your organization has already put data into Energy Star, you can pull it back out of Energy Star, just suck it back into this Energy to Care dashboard. And so it is a great tool. And I would say if you haven't explored it, I would also say, hey, you should take a look at this because it is free, and why not? It just totally makes sense. So the next slide is the poll that I had mentioned. I wanted to find out who is familiar with this tool and who might be using this Energy to Care dashboard. So, yes, you are, no, you're not, or didn't even realize it was available. And so maybe after this webinar today, you'll go explore it. So just giving you a chance to respond to the question.
These polls are anonymous, but we do have some people that said yes. If you're willing to just pop in the chat, raise your hand, or just say who you are, it would be great to know who is using it.
Yeah, and I agree. And also some feedback on it. Do you like it? Is it, just some quick thoughts if you don't mind. Hey, it's simple to use. It's real easy. It's very powerful. My organization, uses this as a bedrock of a way to communicate. Just I because several people are responding that they don't use it. Maybe they were aware of it, or others are saying they didn't even realize it existed. It would be just great to have that immediate feedback, so it might motivate somebody to go explore it if they're so inclined. Yeah, so we got across the board a little bit different exposure to this. Some people, yes, some no's, and other people just didn't realize that it was available. Okay, and let's see if we can't navigate the technology a little bit smoother this time. All
Doing
right.
great.
Yeah. So with that in mind, so this Energy to Care dashboard, again, is a free tool provided by ASH. It's out there, and if you go to the ASH website, and you might already be a member, just explore, you'll see it. And if you have questions of me at the end, please just ask. I'm happy to help you out. But for the next 10 minutes or so, I want to offer you an alternative. We are at Energy Cap, so we are a software company, and we provide a utility management tool. It's called Energy Cap, and it's represented over on the left-hand side of the screen here. So it's a platform that centralizes all your utility data into one spot. So similar to this Energy to Care dashboard, but significantly more robust. It has a lot more tools and features associated with it, and that's what we want to share today, is just some of those features. So in the middle, you'll notice we have something called Smart Analytics. In addition to getting all your utility data in one spot, you also have the ability to pull in interval data. And for those of you in the call that might be unfamiliar with this, interval data is real-time data, usually, that can flow into a dashboard or into a viewing monitor for you to see how your buildings are performing. And it's an excellent tool for understanding where there's opportunities to save and to look at how your buildings have performed over a period of time. So very, very powerful tool. So it's an extension beyond that Energy to Care dashboard that we have here at Energy Cap. We've also got a module to the software called Carbon Hub. Carbon Hub is a reporting tool on your GHG emissions. So if you're looking for a tool or you have regulatory compliance or obligations to report, Carbon Hub is excellent at taking all of your data and doing the calculations on your behalf to figure out all those emission values. And then you can run reports, or you can get the data you need in order to share with others. Something that our clients take advantage of is called bill capture. Some organizations are at the stage in their evolution where they're done with bills. They're ready to offload that responsibility to another company. So currently, many organizations internally take care of all their utility bills. But like I say, some are ready to pay somebody else to do it, bring somebody else in to manage the bills. And we offer that as an option as well, something called bill capture. So each of the things I've described so far are the foundational blocks of Energy Cap and this utility management, but there are other features too. There's advanced accounting, there's chargebacks, there's BI reporting. We are, like most companies, evolving to meet the needs of our clients, and those are other features that our clients are asking for in order to serve their purposes. So that's just a little bit about Energy Cap. But who benefits? Well, everybody across the organization benefits, because Energy Cap is an online tool, so people can log into it with different permissions, but it can be used across facility teams, sustainability offices, finance teams, IT departments. It's a very powerful tool to share information. And one of the things you'll hear me say several times probably during this webinar today is how important the communication piece is and getting everybody on the same page. Once you have utility data in one spot, you need to get everybody together to talk about how can we improve? What can we do to save energy, to save money? And Energy Cap provides the tool, the data to rally around in order to make some of those changes. So where most people start is with something that we call bill management, or they take a look at their bills. And Energy Cap brings all the data into one centralized spot, so one single source of truth. And so my encouragement, if you're brand new to this is absolutely where you have to start. But the next thing you need to do is you need to get out in the field and verify the meters and what the meters serve within your organization. Because at some point, as you try to make changes, you need to be able to capture the data and simultaneously understand the consequences of change that's happening in the field. And so you need to get out in the field, find those meters for a couple of reasons. One that I've just described, so you can appreciate by flipping switches and changing things, like where is it going to affect on your meters. And another is, you'll learn here in the next few minutes, there are all sorts of mistakes that happen with your utility bills. And so by finding the meters in the field and documenting the numbers, the digits, the stuff on them, you can correlate that or relate that back to your bill and catch up with mistakes, because it's very common for utility bills to have mistakes. Another thing that I want to urge you to do is get out and audit your buildings at different times of the day, different weeks of the year, different seasons. Your buildings will act and behave differently during each of those things, the days, the times, the periods of the year. And you have to start to note and notice patterns and anomalies. And also start to pay closer attention to building operations. So as I coach people, what I say, let's get the data. Let's pull all the data into Energy Camp. Let's get it in one spot and let's start to make some observations out in the field. Because what begins to happen is you begin to connect the dots and see opportunities to save. Something that's forgotten about by many people is partnering with their utility companies. I have heard many people tell me, well, Tom, there's just not a lot of money to be made. There's just not a lot of benefit for having relationships with utility companies. So I deprioritize that. I put that down on the list because it's just not going to help. And I would challenge that. Many utility companies are very helpful at helping you to identify opportunities to save. And they have great programs and offer great rebates and incentives. And in many cases, they're way more significantly financially beneficial than what you realize. And so early in this process, or even if you are well into your process, if you've skipped that step, you might double back and just make sure you're working with your utility companies. I wanted to make sure you're aware of this too, is there are three common areas where there are mistakes consistently made. Because we're a software company and we house the data of lots and lots and lots and lots of people, what happens is we see these mistakes all the time. Organizations end up paying for bills that they're not even supposed to be paying for. And this is very common. If you work for an organization, a medical campus or a medical center, let's say, where you have all sorts of different buildings and it's growing and it's changing, that's where many times there are mistakes with account ownership. So as you bring your data into one spot, make sure you're paying for the bills you're supposed to be paying for and not the bills that you're not responsible for. So check the account ownership. Again, you'd be surprised how many times there are mistakes made. A second common area is a meter multiplier. When you get out in the facilities, like I mentioned a minute ago, to start to identify your meters and take pictures of the meters, usually these meters have multipliers stamped on them that should correlate to the bill, but sometimes they don't. And the disconnect that happens between the actual physical meter and the bill could be significant savings because you might be being charged significantly more than you should be. So get out there, double check that. And then lastly, the third area are taxes and fees. And I want to go back to the example that I mentioned just a minute ago about this idea of a campus that's growing where there's more facilities and new meters coming on board. It's been my experience working around the country that as utility providers establish a new meter, what happens in their internal systems is I think it automatically defaults to assessing all taxes and fees, and all the line items in a bill just boom, 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 boom. They just show up on the bill. Whether you're responsible for paying for them or not, they show up. And so particularly if your organization is in a state of change, double check to make sure you're not paying for taxes and fees that you shouldn't be. Because it's more surprising than what you realize. So Each of these three areas has benefits. For some, they're significant. They're very significant. For others, less so. But it is the logical place to start as you move down this path of crossing every T and dotting every I and making sure you're as efficient as possible. Energy Cap also does something else which is very helpful, is it audits the bills as they flow into the system. So Energy Cap, as you receive bills, whether you're putting them in or we're putting them in, where they're flowing into the system, but there are audits and there are flags that are utilized in order to identify areas that just don't seem right. So some of the audits might be for abnormal use or abnormal cost, or maybe there's a gap in the billing days from the last billing cycle to the new cycle. So there are different audits that you can set and run. And so rather than having to go find the problems come to you, and then you can begin to resolve the problems. The other thing that Energy Cap allows you to do is to redirect those to the appropriate person. This box in the bottom right-hand corner is intended to show you that you can redirect a problem. If you have an abnormal cost problem, you can pick somebody who would be dealing with that type of problem and assign them that problem so that they can take it and run with it and ultimately work towards resolution. So Energy Cap is very powerful at auditing bills and finding these flags in order for you to take action and ultimately see the savings that you're entitled to. The other part of bill management is actually digging into the data. It's doing some analysis. So it's looking at that EUI. Great place to start. Have to compare your buildings and see which ones are the energy hogs and which ones are more lean, which ones are running more efficient. But identify those weak links so you can start to build strategies around fixing them. But investigate things that are unusual with cost or use. Demand issues are very common around the country. So understanding the reasonable demands for your buildings, and if you have issues, just seeking resolution on those. But this data also does one other thing. It allows you to pinpoint where you might focus your effort for upgrades and target behavioral changes. So by scrutinizing the data and sifting it and sorting it, it really allows you to put a good plan together for how you might move forward. And the last item here is Energy Cap also merges with Energy Stars. So we, similar to the Energy to Care dashboard, can also share that data so that you can do Energy Star reporting, or you can look at CPEX data as well to determine how you're doing relative to your peers. So rounding out a little bit of the Energy Cap talk, I just want to talk about the features with the most savings potential. So I've focused on so far the utility data piece and some of the other modules that are within the software, but there's great reporting, there's great dashboards that you can either produce just by running reports and have PDFs, or you can have dashboards that are shared across your organization. You can run something that's called cost avoidance. It's a calculation. Let's suppose you're doing something at your organization. So you establish a baseline period and then you change something. Maybe you put in some new lights and you want to see how much that lighting retrofit may have saved you. You can calculate cost avoidance to determine an actual value for that project, to determine an ROI. So cost avoidance, very powerful feature of the software. Again, I had mentioned bill flags a minute ago, so identifying the bill flags. And just a statistic you might find interesting is that what we've found is that roughly 1 in 20 bills has some type of mistake on it. It might be a trivial mistake, it might be something that doesn't have a financial consequence, but that's how prevalent these mistakes are. And so those bill flags help identify those things. Energy Cap, you can download workbooks. You can take data out of Energy Cap, put it in Excel workbooks, and do calculations or run analysis. It's great at tracking project information. And as I mentioned a minute ago, there's benchmarking tools that are just very powerful for understanding your buildings. To finish the conversation about Energy Cap, I want to go through what's called our maturity model. And this is a little bit of a life cycle for many as they use Energy Cap over the course of time. So stage number 1 is really what I've described so far. It's this idea of let's dig into the bills, let's get it right. And many times you can capture 1 to 3% of your utility budget just simply by catching up with the mistakes. That stage 2 is the idea of bill capture, where we can help you with the bill entry and just get the data in there and cut down on people's time because we're taking that responsibility for you and doing it on your behalf. Stage 3 is the idea of smart analytics. It's looking at the interval data. It's digging deeper into your facilities to really understand what's happening and when. And I have some bold print in the middle of this stage number 3 that I want to highlight because it really accentuates what we think. It's shut it off, set it back, and tune it up. And what we mean by that is the best strategy for energy conservation is if you can turn that sucker off. Okay, turn it off because something that's off is not using any energy. If you can't turn it off, then try to set it back. So change the temperature or change how it's running during different times of the day or periods within the year. So set it back, reduce its energy consumption by making some modification. And if you can't turn it off and you can't set it back, then at least tune it up. Make sure if it's going to be running all the time, that it's running as efficiently as possible. And by following those 3 principles, really you're moving more and more closer to being as efficient as possible. Stage 4 of this model is the idea of using the Carbon Hub reporting. So it's looking at your emissions and sharing that and following through on compliance. And then lastly, and probably the biggest step and kind of the transition into the second half of the webinar, it's taking action. After you establish some procedure, some policy, some guidelines for how you're going to run your organization, taking action can have huge savings. And what I want to do in the next half hour is just talk about what those actions might be. And so that's the transition from the software part of this to the field part, the boiler room part of making these changes. So I want to transition back to ASH and their Energy to Care toolkit. I want to give them credit for this language because they did a great job. I mentioned earlier in the webinar how they provide some wonderful resources. And if you're not part of ASH, if you're part of a healthcare organization, you need to consider that because they just got some great tools. So what they say is understanding how efficiently your building is currently using energy is the first step to reducing energy consumption. And I totally agree with that. It's getting the data in one spot and getting out in the field. You just got to understand it because what you'll find, having lived this dozens and dozens and dozens of times with people around the country, is once you start to understand it, you get excited about it. You start to build momentum about it. You see all the opportunities and things you can change, and you see great value in the actions that you take. The second part is they say you need to establish an energy manager or a champion. These projects and this effort to become more sustainable and more efficient does not happen with one person. One person needs to lead it, but it needs to be a team of people that work together in order to achieve these objectives. So somebody's got to identify who that person's going to be. The next thing is you have to engage an executive sponsor. You have to have the CEO or a VP or somebody with a title, somebody who cares, get involved because that authority, that credibility is so important to drive change and people's actions to become different. So you've got to get that person, you've got to win over the executives, and then you got to start to get more data. So it's the benchmarking and sharing results. It's communicating with people how you're doing and showing them the opportunities that exist out there and slowly winning people over. You have to establish clear and reasonable goals. You can't set pie in the sky type of goals and expect to achieve them. You might achieve them over time, but one of the things I coach people on is about being patiently persistent as they go through this. Because usually change doesn't happen fast. It takes time for things to change. So it's setting clear goals, goals that are achievable, and just keep moving the goal line. Just keep moving what the standards are, and over time you'll get to where you need to be. This next item, establishing a team huddle, had mentioned this a little bit previously. Got to get people together. People from all over your organization, people from facilities and finance and operations and doctors and nurses and building managers and whoever you can think of, there needs to be represented in a team huddle because people need to have a say. If there's concerns about temperature or the way facilities are safety, if people don't feel safe when they go to work or they're uncomfortable, they're going to push back and all of your energy initiatives are going to stall. So you need to have representatives who can weigh in. And so you can establish goals and standards that are achievable, and then you can be successful. So all of that turns into developing action plans and tracking the results. And so that's where you got to start. But some other things to consider too, just some additional improvement principles, is developing these energy use profiles. So you have to look in the buildings and see when people are in the building, like why the energy use in the building might be from 8 to 5 during a typical workday for for a building, or why it's running 24/7. It doesn't match. There are people in the building or there are people not in the building. Do the energy use profiles match the occupancy of the building? When you're ready, start to complete and calculate the greenhouse gas emissions, so you have that data when you're ready for it. This idea of distributing media and sharing reports or dashboards with people gets people involved. I would highlight the fourth item on this list about implementing energy efficiency projects with caution. Certainly, there's great benefit for doing energy efficiency projects, but I would not charge in and do these right away. I think what you have to do is understand your facilities better and identify the opportunities better before you start spending money and committing resources to things that may or may not be beneficial. So although I agree with implementing them, I think it needs to be more strategic and planned than just charging in and spending the money. Something gets overlooked many times is a training plan. What I've learned in working literally with hundreds, probably even thousands of people around the country is most people will do what they're asked to do. If they're asked in the right professional way and it's done with respect and it's follows the protocols and procedures of your organization. So it's not a matter of people not wanting to do the right thing in terms of energy conservation. It's about training people. It's about educating people and helping people understand what's valuable. A common misconception is people think that the cost of a computer is negligible. It doesn't matter if I leave my computer on every night. It's like it's negligible. Well, that isn't true. Computers do have a cost. And I'm not suggesting for a second you should go tell everybody to turn their computers off. What I'm saying is you should make sure that you're communicating to people what are reasonable things that they can do in their work environment, such as turning off a computer, communicate the value of that, because it's not about one computer. It could be about 500 or 5,000 computers that could be managed differently. That's where the energy benefit comes. But it's back to the theme of training. You have to train the people and teach the people so they can see the benefit of managing their computer in a different way in order to save energy. Another item on the list here is this idea of measurement and verification. So it's using tools and strategies to accurately calculate savings or changes that are taking place. And not to be forgotten, the last item on the list is celebrating. As you go through this process of change, you have to celebrate your successes because it builds momentum. So that might mean flyers that go out around an organization. It might mean an email. It might be, for some organizations I've worked with, they have actually financially reimbursed employees or given them a stipend or something like that because an organization saved so much money. I'm not suggesting that's right for everybody. What I am saying is find the thing that's best for you and find a way to celebrate it for people because that changes behaviors and actions. A few other things to take action on. Keeps coming up over and over again with this idea of benchmark your portfolio. And what's a little different about this bullet than the previous ones in the webinar so far is I would say benchmark your portfolio for inpatient and outpatient facilities. And here's why I included that extra language in this bullet. I have seen people begin to paint their organization with a broad brush, and they want to assume everything is the same. So if one building has to run 24/7, well, then we got to run them all 24/7. My point with this is you have to break things down and consider your inpatient facilities. Can they reasonably be run different than your outpatient facilities? And likewise, can they be reasonably run different for the benefit of energy conservation? And then also think about if you have a hospital or a main medical center, and then you have satellite facilities around that, how are they operating? What is their occupancy like? What are the hours of operation? And how can they be run differently? And so the point with this is you have to break it into buckets. You have to sift and sort it a little bit to find opportunities, but stay away from the one size fits all because there's a lot of waste with that approach to energy management. The second item on this list here, I say run daily report of failed or overwritten control points in your building automation system. This is the number one thing that I see as a failure across the country in working with people is that people tend to disregard their building automation system. They assume because it's flipping all the switches and it's controlling everything that it's working properly. We had a company, we paid $10 million to get that thing installed, and we have all these new facilities that everything's working right. This is the number one oversight for people is they don't realize that there are issues with the system and somebody's got to catch up with it. Somebody's got to run these reports and find out what's not working right and then put a plan together in order to fix it. I'll say evaluate all lighting and HVAC systems that don't shut down or that can be shut down during peak hours. So again, don't treat it as a one size fits all, assume it has to run one way. See if there's options to turn things off when things are not in use. This next bullet, make sure you know your organization's capital allocation, the process and expectations. So every organization is unique, but understand what's involved with making capital changes and where the money's going to come from to fix these things or buy new things or plan improvements. And the last one here is find an energy service provider. You need to find partners. Many times, organizations don't have the people within to solve all the problems. You need to find good partners, people you trust, people you can rely on. And so there are many reputable companies out there that can help you and support you. So take the time to find a good energy service provider, and they can guide you as you move forward. Common areas of waste. Again, these are the things that I've seen all over the place. And number one on the list is always going to be for medical institutions is HVAC overventilation. If you're new to this, let me break this down a little bit for you. Every commercial building is obligated to ventilate, and there are standards that are established for CO2 levels within those buildings. Hospitals and medical facilities have higher standards than other buildings for the obvious reasons. But what happens is many systems default to ventilating way more than what they need to do, particularly if a building goes through periods of time of reduced occupancy and it is being ventilated at a very significant rate. And so HVAC overventilation, you might say, well, what's the big deal? You're just bringing in more outside air. Well, the big deal is that many times that outside air is coming in and it's really hot and or humid, or it's really cold, which means it needs to be cooled or it needs to be heated. So reducing the amount of air flowing into a building can dramatically affect the cost of HVAC. The other thing that happens is bullet number 2 here is these facilities, because they're sophisticated, many times can simultaneously heat and cool. So a building has the ability to produce heat or cooling. And so the systems can fight with one another. And if the sensors aren't calibrated correctly or the system isn't working properly, you can be paying essentially 2 bills. You can be paying to heat the facility and cool the facility simultaneously. And so you have to understand if your system has the ability to do that, and how is it going to adjust by changing some settings. So there are mechanisms within the building automation system to put in what's referred to as a dead band or a series of temperatures where you heat, you cool, or you don't heat or cool in order to keep people comfortable. But you need to make sure you understand what those settings are and how they're set, and make sure that people are trained, because people might be making decisions for setting the system and they're confused, and the system is simultaneously heating and cooling. Other areas of waste is lighting unoccupied spaces. It's very common anymore where people have light or motion sensors. So as rooms are vacated, the lights go off. Those tend to fail after a relatively short period of time, after a couple years. Is anybody following up on that? Is anybody going back and recalibrating those sensors, replacing those sensors? Somebody's got to be keeping an eye on that. And there are some situations where there aren't any sensors in the first place. So you need to make sure you're not lighting unoccupied spaces. Another term in the 4th item here is vampire draw. This is one that I find that some people aren't familiar with. The idea is this, is that all electronic equipment will have a trickle charge that's being sucked out of the equipment. So your DVD player at home, your television at home, your radio, there's some type of small electrical draw that's always being pulled from the equipment, by the electrical system. And that in and of itself, it's not that big of a deal until you start to talk about the hundreds or thousands of devices where you might have this vampire draw. And so you might say, well, what's the solution? I got to leave stuff plugged in. I would say, well, do you? Is there equipment that's used during some periods of the year and not other times of the year where it could be safely and reasonably unplugged? It wouldn't be unreasonable to do that. Are there periods where the facilities are busier than others, where everything should be plugged in? It makes sense to do so. And other periods, well, this is a kind of a dormant time. We go through 2 months where there's just not as much activity. Could you change some of the plug load stuff in this vampire draw and just have a process of unplugging things and then just plugging it back in when it's needed? So something that, again, that's out there that just requires conversation, discussion. Is it reasonable? And if so, who can do it and how can we implement it? And the last item on this list is old chillers and boilers. Since many of the facilities that we manage and we work with, they have plants. There's a chiller plant and there's a boiler plant. There's a steam plant. There's huge energy use taking place, and then chill water is distributed throughout a facility, or steam or hot water is pumped throughout a facility. If you have old equipment, inefficient chillers and boilers, it might be time to start to look at those because they're running a lot, right? We're talking about many facilities that might be running 24/7. If these huge pieces of equipment are running all the time, the fact that they're inefficient is going to cause significant impact in your bills. And so this list here, although relatively short, captures a lot of the great opportunities in the place that I would start. If I were working with you directly, this is where we would start our conversation in order to understand where you're at. I want to transition next into a list of some other energy saving strategies. These are a little bit more sophisticated and a little more technical, so I will try to split the difference between just assuming that everybody knows and just not going through all the nuts and bolts of this. Just try to find the sweet spot where people have an understanding of what's on this list. So number one on the list is retro commissioning, and I mentioned this earlier. It's this idea of looking at your building controls and making sure everything is working correctly. I want to talk more about this in a second, but I wanted to also have it number one on the list because it has to be at the top of the list. This is the number one way an organization needs to save energy. The second thing on the list is energy efficient lighting. You need to observe around your facilities and find out, do you have areas with old lighting where there's still fluorescent lighting? Have you moved to LED? Because this lighting around healthcare facilities is typically on a lot. And if it's on all the time, it would pay for itself pretty doggone quickly if you were able to replace old lighting. So energy efficient lighting, if you remember that pie chart that I had early in the webinar today where I talked about lighting being potentially 20% of the bill, this is what I mean by that is you have to recognize it's a big chunk of the pie, and if it's on all the time, you have to make sure that it's running and it's efficient. Number three, operating room unoccupied setbacks. So the idea is this: you might have operating rooms that run nearly 24/7, but you might have other facilities that are, running a much tighter window, 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. What's happening during those hours when operations are not taking place? Are you able to take the temperature of that space and set it back? And a big one is the airflow in that space. Operating rooms require a tremendous amount of fresh air being pumped into them, but when nobody's there during that unoccupied time, systems can be set to reduce the amount of outside air flowing into that operating room. And again, it's a huge opportunity for savings that tends to get overlooked. So if you have never thought of that, you might start exploring that. That's a whopper. There's a great opportunity there. Number four, introducing this idea of an economizer. If you haven't heard that before, but an economizer is like a damper, or it's like a mini blind in a house that opens and closes and allows air in from outside. Economizers, their purpose is to allow outside air into a facility when the outside air is desirable, but to keep outside air out when it's not desirable. So if you have one of those beautiful spring or fall days where there's low humidity and beautiful temperatures outside, economizers should open up and allow a lot of that air to flow in to flush out your facility and keep it comfortable and fresh. However, if it's raining outside and it's humid or it's particularly cold, economizers should close and minimize the amount of air flowing into the facility. Economizers are one of those things that are not very well understood. There's typically a lot of mistakes made with economizers, and there's sensors and there's electronic stuff that doesn't function properly. So if you're looking for another area to explore to see if there's an opportunity to save, I would steer you towards economizers. Usually it's an opportunity that's ripe for you. So temperature and ventilation, unoccupied setbacks, we talked about that with the operating room, but the idea of let's change the temperature, let's change the ventilation rates, let's do it all over the place if we can, if the opportunity arises. Number six, steam trap repair and replacement. Many facilities have steam that's moving around our campuses. So you have to have steam traps, and steam traps are a major maintenance challenge for the maintenance team, the operations team. So we need to have the resources available around that to make sure that steam traps are being repaired and replaced if necessary, because there is huge waste that occurs when in the steam system if things are not repaired or maintained properly. Number 7, thermostat temperature set points and standards. Here's something that I've seen a lot is organizations want to cater to individuals' comfort level. So let's say an individual wants to have a space that's 70 degrees and the person next to them, they want it 74. If an organization tries to do that, if they try to set the standard or they try to accommodate people by giving them the flexibility of getting the temperatures they want, it really becomes very challenging and very wasteful. I had mentioned earlier about how many of our buildings can heat and cool simultaneously. And if you have thermostats on the wall that are set uniquely and differently, you can have one room physically next to another room where one is heating and one is cooling and they have an open doorway. What needs to be done is you have to agree on reasonable temperature set points that people can agree is within a reasonable boundary of comfort. And it's hard, it's challenging because people want to have their personal preferences met, but it's really a necessary part of this. To operate these massive facilities, you have to agree on certain numbers. And I have an opinion on what those numbers would be. My bias is heating to 70 and cooling to 74, but that might not be the right numbers for you. I would argue it's more important that you have a number, even if it's not the most energy efficient number, you need to have some number that you agree on that can be established consistently around your organization so the systems don't fight with one another. Number 8 is a little bit more of a complicated one, or one that requires a little more knowledge, is this idea of air handling unit static duct pressure reset. Let me simplify and say this. Many of the systems in our medical facilities can flow a different amount of air. So air is being pushed down a duct, but it doesn't have to be pushed with the same pressure all the time. You can change the pressure based on the need of the occupants and the temperature. And so there's something called a static pressure reset, where it changes the pressure based on the time of the day or based on the temperature conditions, and it should be implemented as a way to save energy. Okay, so that's a little bit of a trickier one, more sophisticated, but it's a great opportunity. Number 9, 10, 11, really kind of they're all the same thing as number 8, where it's a reset, meaning that for chill water or hot water, it's changing based on the need. And let me give you an example with chill water. So chill water is used to cool our facilities, and so it's going to be needed during the hot weather. Well, the hottest day of the year occurs one day of the year. And so the system needs to be set to accommodate that hottest day of the year so it can be air conditioned and people can be comfortable. But every other day of the year is not the hottest day of the year. And the system should be able to recalibrate itself or reset itself to not make as much cold water because it's not needed. That's the idea of a reset schedule. The system is automatically adjusting because the conditions outside have changed and the need inside the building has changed. And so you have to adjust to accommodate for those conditions. And there's huge savings associated with that. So that's true for chill water, it's true for hot water, and it's also true for number 11 for air handling units and the supply temperature. So the occupants in a building are going to need fresh air always, but the air that's being delivered to the spaces can change to keep people comfortable. And that's the idea for number 11, is changing the reset of the air temperature in order to accommodate the people in the building, but to minimize the energy use. And lastly, number 12 on this list is a simple one, but a really hard one to execute. It's this idea of replacing air filters in your air handling units and rooftop units and around your facilities. There's a lot of them out there, and it's challenging, but a team of people needs to be assigned this responsibility, and it needs to be done religiously, regularly, in order for an organization to see the maximum benefit. So it's not fun work for someone, but it's necessary work in order to be as efficient as possible. So as we start to round out the presentation, I want to try to leave a few minutes at the end here for questions. But just picking up the pace here a little bit, I had mentioned a minute ago about how retro commissioning is just so important to saving energy in our facilities. But you got to develop a plan. You got to get the people together to have a conversation about how we're going to manage things. So you got to develop a plan. Then you got to test the systems. And the third bullet there is you got to then take action. You got to repair and you got to replace stuff. I will tell you though, this is the number one thing that if you haven't done this consistently, the results of this will surprise you. I learned through doing this over and over again that people have this assumption that things are working fine, nobody's complaining, everything's good. But when you really dig into it, you'll find there are issues with your system, and the issues are probably creating some type of comfort somewhere for someone and simultaneously costing you more money than what you realize. So make sure retro commissioning is really high in the list. I wanted to give you a couple key questions here. Is if you're wanting to again put together a plan and think through this whole thing, is you have to consider what the financial threshold or return on investment that needs to be reached in order for somebody to endorse a project. So as you're trying to look at your utility today and you're trying to strategize what projects to do, what are your thresholds? What's your return on investment? You have to talk about that. You got to get people around the table to decide what it's going to look like. And number two here is, what's the process for signing authority? How are you going to build a process to have the people sign off to actually get the work done? So talk about that up front. What are the thresholds and who's going to sign? And can you include operational efficiency into your ROI calculations? What I mean by that is if you do an energy efficiency project and it reduces maintenance costs or reduces maintenance time and effort, can that be part of your calculation to justify a process? Some people say yes, some people say no. It should be talked about and planned so you get what you want. Are there any utility incentives that are available? Look for them. I mentioned them a half hour ago. Make sure you're partnering with your utility company. And I also started the presentation by talking about energy costs and how they're rising. So how fast are energy costs rising? And does that change your behavior and accelerate projects because you would see savings faster if you took action sooner? Danielle, I have a couple links here. And do you have these? I wanted to maybe have these put in the chat. Do you have those? They're part of the presentation. I know they're on mine, and I don't know if you have access to the presentation, but
I do. I will post those in the chat in just a second.
yeah. So I just wanted to let everybody know who's on the in the webinar today that Energy Star has a healthcare energy savings financial analysis calculator. What it is it's a souped up or a macro enabled spreadsheet through Energy Star that allows you to look at your facilities and put in some numbers and decide if doing a project has value or not. And I wanted to bring it to your attention if you were unaware so that you can maybe go explore it. It might be a helpful tool for you. The other thing I wanted to bring your attention is through ASH, they have the Healthcare Clean Energy Exchange, and Daniela's will give you a link, but it's intended to help healthcare organizations with energy procurement. So procurement's this idea where if I can buy cheaper energy someplace, why not? This gives you a pathway to try to find cheaper providers. So maybe you can get a better value for your gas or your electricity, depending upon the environment you're in, whether you're in a regulated or deregulated environment. So as we wrap up, and again, I'd love to answer any questions you have in these last 5 minutes. I took 10, 15 minutes of the presentation to talk about Energy Cap, this software that we have. And I wanted to respond to people if anybody's interested with a follow-up from us. So if you'd like to hear more about Energy Cap, either from me or one of my colleagues, please let us know. We're happy to reach out to you and teach you more about the tool that we have.
Yeah, and while people are responding to that, Rydell, and I'm not sure how I say your name, Michelle and Greg, feel free to not chime in, but I know you guys were putting some things in the chat of what you're doing and some of your challenges with the OR setbacks and all the fun things. So if you wanted to chime in and just share, we'd love to hear it. We didn't have any questions come in other than just some commentary in the chat, which is great. Greg, appreciate your compliments of Tom. I agree. He's brilliant, has lots of good ideas. But yeah, Michelle, go ahead and share a little bit with us if you're willing to share.
Sure. My name's Michelle Kroll. I'm the energy manager at Corewell Health in Michigan. Um, I work very closely with our utilities. One of the programs that we do is a strategic energy management program. So we've been doing a lot of duct static pressure resets and supply air temperature resets for air handling units, um, and trying to implement learnings from one location to another hospital. But yeah, just one thing that I get very often is like, oh, we can't do anything with the OR. Um, maybe it's running 24/7, or they don't want to make any changes, right, to upset anyone or to meet code. Um, so yeah, would just be interested to hear more about OR setbacks.
Daniela, if
Yeah.
you want to share my my contact offline too, I don't mind having this conversation offline.
We also love having conversations online.
No, I could do it online. It's just longer than we have the time.
No. Well, what I'm saying is, so Michelle, I think maybe you have or haven't been to, we've got Eco Champions and we do what we call water cooler talks.
Oh, we
And
could do
so
that.
it typically is like, not necessarily what you want to talk about at the water cooler, but it's topics exactly like this. And so bringing customers and non-customers, just people in the industry to talk about how they're handling things like this. Greg, thank you for offering it up. I will definitely share your info with Michelle, and Tom and I can work on maybe setting something up with this group of people, because I know there's also some great stuff going on at Baptist Health South Florida. They're actually doing a presentation on Friday in Eco Champions. I'll send the link for that too, but appreciate that, Greg.
Sure. Yeah. I'll save any conversation to for the Echo Champion thing. I won't give anything away.
Yeah. If I could just chime in real quickly, and I'd love to have if there's more questions, but I would say, Michelle, and just everybody on the call, is what tends to be a limiting reagent in this is that people always see things as an all or nothing, meaning like if we're going to do something in the operating room, it has to happen like everywhere. And my feeling is you need to run pilots. My coaching of people is you need to test things and prove the viability of things by isolating an experiment to one OR or one facility, prove that it's can happen, and then try a second or a third one. And so my coaching ultimately is don't try to solve all the problems in one fell swoop. Try to incrementally solve them. And I found that most people are more comfortable doing things incrementally than just trying to go for
It's great advice.
You mean don't do everything all at once?
it.
Understand. Thank you.
Crazy.
That's great
Yeah.
advice.
We did that exact same thing for OR setbacks. So totally agree.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's scary, right? I mean, it's a big thing. It's an important thing, and so I can understand the opposition and the resistance. So that's just like I say, just a general thought. Danielle, anything else? Looks like we're just about to the top of the hour. Any other questions that came in into the chat or the question and answers?
I don't think so. Rydell, I'd love for you to unmute yourself so I can learn how to say your name.
Right there. You're doing great.
Great.
Yes.
He did post some stuff. He was one of the ones that is using the Ash tool. So
Great.
that's great to hear. And apparently they give out awards for
They
people that
do.
are saving the most energy and using it the best. So appreciate you sharing that information.
Yes, we for the last 2 consecutive years we have been getting Energy to Care awards. It require that you report these to your energy consumption into the dashboard, and you can get an award if you drop your energy consumption by 10% in 1 year or 15% in 2 consecutive years.
That's fantastic. Very motivating. That's awesome.
Yeah. I would like to mention about Energy Cap. I'm a new user for the last 6 months, and I use it very quick to do a report and identify, you know, bills with taxes, and we're a tax exempt organization. So up to now, we have been refunded 1.3 millions on that topic. So
And that's just in 6 months. I think you guys are a fairly new customer. I was talking to Chris earlier. That was
correct. Yes.
in February.
Yeah, I met with Chris this morning, and he mentioned about this is speaking tomorrow. So yeah.
Awesome. Love it. That is fantastic.
So
Yeah,
yeah, use Energy
congratulations.
Cap for late fees also, find and talk to your finance team to look for those, sometimes you have 15, 20 white days to pay for your bill. So Energy Cap will help you to identify those utilities that you're paying late.
Awesome. Thanks for weighing in. That's great information. Again, we've all seen it here at Energy Cap, just the impact, and many times the numbers aren't as eye-popping as what you just described, but there's usually something, and it's worth pursuing. So that's great.
Awesome. Well, Tom, as always, thank you so much. And crew who jumped in to speak, appreciate it. We hope to see you guys on Eco Champions this Friday. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. I don't know how you can find us, but I'll send everyone a follow-up email with some information. There you go. That's what it is.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending today. I appreciate it. And again, this is me here. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or directly through email, happy to keep the conversations going. So have a wonderful day and be safe. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.